let's see how you can do on this one all on your own. You might need a whiteboard to kind of help you to highlight or to record your keywords. Remember that process. First, you want to read the questions and figure out what are those keywords. Second, you want to go into the story and actually highlight or point to those keywords so it can kind of help you to find where you might find your answer. Then you want to make sure that you've actually answered the question given. What I want you to do now is pause the video. When you think you have the answer to each of these 5 questions, you can start the video again and check your work. Go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. So you think you have all of the answer to these 5 questions. Let's check. First thing you had to do is find the keyword. Who is a keyword because it's letting us know we're looking to describe a person, and that person that we're looking to describe is George Willig. What does George Willig climb? Again, we're looking for George, and we're looking for the thing that he climbs. What do people call George? We want to know what people call, and George is our main character. Where is letting us know we're looking for a location, and we're looking for where he climbs a building. And then when is letting us know we're looking for a time or a date, and again you want to know when he climbed the building. I used these keywords then and highlighted them in my story. So George Willig was important. He comes up as many of our questions. We wanted to know what he climbs and where he climbs, and we wanted to know what people call him. So I highlighted things like people call George Willig. I highlighted climbing. I highlighted buildings because it talks about climbing buildings, and I wanted to know what George Willig climbs, so I have George and climbs. Then, using those keywords, I could find my answers. So I first started out with who is George Willig, and it says right here, George Willig is a climber. So your answer to your first answer is that you're looking for a climber. Check to make sure that you had found out that he is a climber as well. Notice it was right there in the story. You could point to the answer. Now it says, what does George Willig climb? I kept reading to say he grew up in Iowa as a boy and became famous when he moved out of the state. Most people climb mountains. Now some people would stop there and say, climb in mountains. That's my answer. But notice it didn't say that George climbs mountains. It says most people climb mountains. When I continued, I found out that George climbs buildings. So if you had the word buildings, you would be correct. Can you explain why mountains would be the wrong answer? You said it was because George doesn't climb buildings. Most people climb buildings, but most people climb mountains, but George climbs buildings. You'd be correct. Now on the next one it says, what do people call George? And this one was a nice one because it said right in the story that people call George, so it's right there, the human fly. So if I was looking for that answer right there, I could point right there in the story. People call George the human fly. Now this where question could be a little bit tricky because there were 2 places in this story. The first place in the story was Iowa, and the second place in the story was New York City. You really had to pay attention to the other key words. It said, where did George climb buildings? Here it says he grew up in Iowa. Iowa is a where, but it's not where he climbed buildings. If I looked for those keywords of climbed buildings, I could see that he climbed buildings in New York City. So where he climbed buildings is New York City. Then I wanted to know when did he climb buildings. So I'm still using those keywords of climb buildings. And I'm looking for a when, a time. My when he climbed buildings says in the summer of 1977. He climbed the side of the tallest building. So when he climbed buildings will be right here, the summer of 1977. Now I want you to think about your answers. Did you get all 5 of these answers correct? If you used your strategies, there'd be no reason why you couldn't get them correct. They are all right there in the story. And even if you thought you remembered the answer, like I thought I remembered where was Iowa, you still have to go back into the story to prove that you have those keywords. So who is George Willig? A climber. What does George climb? Buildings. What do people call George? The human fly. Where did he climb buildings was New York City. Not where he grew up, but where he climbs the buildings is New York City. And when did he climb buildings? In the summer of 1977. So thinking about everything that you learned, which of these strategies are correct when you're trying to answer right there questions? Do you think you just guess? No, that's a pretty easy one. We know that we can't just guess. The answer's in the story. There's no reason to guess. What do you do first after you read those questions? You said look for the keywords. You're absolutely correct. You want to use those as your scavenger hunt. Then you want to skim and scan through the story and find those keywords. Once you have found those keywords, you can point to the answer right in the story, just like I started doing by drawing arrows. Do you think you need to make any personal connections for these questions? Probably not. They're all right there in the story. There's no reason to make a connection to how you would feel or where you would climb a building. You just look right in the story. Do you think you need to use more than one part of the story to answer each question? Probably not. If it's a right there question, you should be able to point to it in one sentence. It is right there. I can't very easily point to more than one place if it's just right there, so I only need one key sentence. I just have to get lucky and find those keywords in that one place. Well, that kind of summarizes right there questions. Remember, you look for keywords in the question, and you skim and scan through the story to find those keywords, and finally you point to your answer in your story. You do not guess. Even if you think you know the answer, you still go back into the story and you point to the answer being right there. And remember, these are the questions that answer things like who, when, where, what. Those simple questions that are looking for right there details that the author has given to you. You just need to take the time to find them. Go ahead and continue on to your next activity in your website.